anyone who has missed their cruise ship and was left behind, what happened? Story 1 got left behind in Nassau. Once thought I had time to grab food and shop a little, ended up losing track, heard the ship horn while waiting for my conch fritters and sprinted back, but they had already pulled the ramp, had to go to the port office. They gave me a paper with next port info and told me I'd have to fly there myself. 450 flight later, I caught up in Jamaica, day and a half of stress just for some hot sauce and a knockoff watch. Never again, bro. Now I'm back on that boat an hour early. Every time. Story 2, we missed the departure because our flight to Florida was cancelled. The airline put us on a plane to the Bahamas, and we caught the ship there, missed just the first night and day. Story 3, I own a tour company. I give tours to cruise ship passengers. I guarantee they will get back to their ship on time. I get them back an hour before they need to be back. When asked what I'd do if I failed at my guarantee, I tell them I'll buy you a plane ticket to the next town. It helps solve their unease, but all you can do if you miss a ship is try to catch back up to it. Story 4, if you stick with a cruise line, arrange shore excursions. They'll hold the ship for you. If you opt to venture out on your own and get delayed, you'll have to find your own way to the next port to meet up with the ship again. Story 5, on a cruise from Australia to New Zealand, my then wife and I were at Way to Workshop with our kids. To save, we organized the day trip ourselves rather than going on the one organized by the cruise. The cost of their trip was 5 times what we paid for the same thing. After the excellent tour of Weta, ex-wife was looking in the gift shop for ages and finally got what would turn out to be the most expensive Lord of the Rings fridge magnet in history. We missed all the taxis that were outside, so had to get gift shop to call one for us. We didn't have mobile phones as we didn't think we'd need them. Again, this was to save. After waiting for an eternity for a taxi, the driver told us that there was gridlock in Wellington due to the cricket ending and a major accident. We got back to Wellington 30 minutes after the ship was supposed to leave. As we had been told repeatedly that the ship would not wait for anyone, we decided to go to a hotel and arrange a hire car to get to the next port, Napier. It turned out that the ship waited over an hour for us. We emailed the cruise line to let them know we would be getting back on board in Napier. We tried to fly, way too expensive. We tried to catch a train, none running. We tried to catch a bus, all booked out. We hired a car, a nightmare as there were hardly any available. The drive was pretty great. Saw lots of NZ that we never would have. It took us 6 hours to drive. The cost of the hotel and the car hire was a bit over $1,500. Ex-wife still has the fridge magnet, the most expensive fridge magnet in the world. We didn't get divorced for another 3 years, so I don't think the fridge magnet had anything to do with that. Story 6, we mixed up the dates and showed up a day late. We could have easily caught up with the ship on a ferry to Catalina from Long Beach, but they wouldn't let us and we missed the whole cruise. Story 7, I've never missed a cruise ship, but I had friends where the cruise ship left them behind. The cruise ship put them up in a hotel and then flew them to their next destination. They also bought them clothes and food until the cruise ship made the next port. It was literally a whole thing. They left the whole Gulf excursion behind. Story 8, friend missed the ship in Juneau. It was a very expensive international flight to Vancouver to get their luggage. The port paperwork has the name of the port agent. Call them if you're running late, as sometimes the ship will wait for you. The hotel director and security will go into your cabin, open your safe and get your passport. They'll hand this and other paperwork to the port authority hole, hopefully help you onto the next port. Money is on you. Travel insurance won't help if it's your fault. For what it's worth, we keep our passports and extra meds in a go bag in the safe. Edit, wrong position named. Story 9, when they say the boat leaves at 3 p.m. you better believe it. Some people think that the boat will wait an hour for me because I'm important, right? Nope, you silly Billy, it's gone. Story 10, back in the early 2000s, we missed our carnival ship in Grand Cayman. We had to go to immigration, but our passports were locked in our ship room safe. They called the ship faxed copies of our passports, and got us a ride on Princess Cruise. We had an amazing time, in a much nicer room, on a much nicer cruise. We met our ship in Cozumel the next day. It didn't cost us anything. I thought it was an amazingly adventurous trip. My husband was embarrassed and furious, but I had a great time. Needless to say, we aren't married anymore. Story 11, my dad had a bad accident in one of the British Virgin Isles and completely destroyed both knees. My mom had to go back to the cruise ship where the staff escorted her back to their cabin and just shoved everything they owned into large garbage bags, then put her back on the pier. Cruise ship left and my poor parents were stuck there in a tiny hospital with next to no medical services or staff over Christmas for a week before getting med evac to FL, where they were stuck another week. Dad had emergency surgery while there, before finally getting med evac home. Luckily they had travel insurance which covered everything, or they would have wound up taking a mortgage on their home at best, declaring medical bankruptcy at worst. Story 12, we passed out on the beach in Cozumel and got back to the dock to see our ship pulling away. We had nothing, just bathing suits and a little cash. We ended up in the immigration office being interrogated by some officers. My girlfriend at the time was mouthing off to them and generally being shitty. We broke up shortly after we returned. I don't know what went on behind the scenes, but they got us on another cruise ship that was heading to the same port as our original ship. The room was 1000 XS nicer. We bought some clothes from the gift shop and made the best of it. I've seriously cut down on the drinking since then. Story 13, not trying to be a negative, but if you miss the departure line for a cruise ship you have some serious time management maturity issues, lol. Unless like some insane thing happened that prevented you from making it, you really need to learn how to adult if you're doing like being late for a cruise ship leaving. Story 14 worked on a cruise ship, and you have no idea how common a problem this is. I'd say 34 of the ports would leave at least one passenger behind, so it's a well-rehearsed routine. Normal procedure is for passengers to be back to the ship 1 hour before departure. Once all those people are checked in through the security system, the passports for all the missing people, usually 20, are gathered for landing ashore. The ship continues accepting people and filing their passports away until the departure time. If the weather forecast is good, there's usually an extra hour built into the schedule, so at the captain's discretion, they can wait a bit longer. If there are a lot of passengers missing, more than 6, or it's more than one group missing, we'd usually wait, if it was only January 3rd Wednesday sail. While the ship is departing, the passports for all missing passengers are landed with a local agent. This person will wait on the dock, sometimes overnight, to give the passengers their passport and help them book alternate travel to the next port at the passenger's expense. Sometimes this was a flight, but often a bus or train. When passengers arrive at the ship in the next port, they are welcomed aboard and allowed to continue their cruise. One time we had 2 passengers not show up at all. The second day, the agent had the passports couriered to the passenger's embassy and reported them missing. No idea what happened to them. I'd say cruises all in one country would likely have different procedures, but it's very common, so they'll have something planned for sure. Story 15, not a cruise ship, but a landing purpose destroyer. 22nd MEU ported in Civitavecchia, Italy, south of Rome. One of the SSG Red Tag Marines stayed the night at a local woman's apartment and missed the ship. We saw him running down the sea break as the ship pulled away. A submarine from the task force turned around to pick him up, and then he was flown over to our destroyer, lost rank from corporal to private, bread and water diet, confined to the brig, and extra police duties until we returned to the States. Story 16, never fly in the same day of departure. We always go to the departure city 1 to 3 days early, and just make that part of the trip. No anxiety over a missed connection, flat tire, delayed flight, etc., and it always takes a couple days to decompress down to vacation mode. So when you get on board after a couple days enjoying Miami or wherever, you are already at the right pace. Story 17, my daughter missed the cruise because she got off the boat to buy some lip gloss. She ended up staying with that nice family that owned the burger restaurant in the town. Story 18, my tale of a lost soul on the 7 seas. I was but a wee lad following my cousins around deck when we sighted a scene every 6-year-old boy gets excited for, the arcade. The hours melted as we ignored the tropical breeze and traded away our time battling in combat most mortal. 'Twas glorious. As must, our coinage ran out, but apparently my luck had not. My cousins leading as relieving, I absent-mindedly check each coin slot for any forgotten treasure. There did I find the token of my undoing. I called out, I must have, but looking up from the machine after spending my last life, I learn him now alone years. Years I spent wandering those halls, every door the same, every face unfamiliar, until eventually a kind soul took me to the captain who put my blubbering butt on the intercom to be claimed. The whole ship heard me wailing for my mom who eventually came running, and thus ends my saga on the seas. Story 19, went to Seattle to catch an Alaskan cruise, went to the Pike Market, the Needle, had dinner by the ocean looking at the cruise pier, mom saying we'll be on one of those tomorrow. Wake up to from my mom, never heard before, she had written the day down wrong. I think they ended up giving us 75 to another cruise and we booked a condo in Whistler and rented a van and drove up there. Ended up being one of our best family vacations. We scratched the van and my dad and I spent a day finding a Chrysler dealership that had the right coat of touch-up paint, and we bondoed and painted it well enough to pass the inspection at the Hertz place. Had a stop in Casablanca, decided to rent a car and see the Atlas Mountains. First off the ship, to the rental place and we're driving. Make it to the mountains around 1 p.m. and head back. Hit Casablanca traffic around 5 p.m. Ship departs at 6 p.m. At 5:40 we abandoned the rental car, took some pictures of the location, locked the keys inside the glove box and run away from the traffic area to find a taxi. We had been moving one intersection per 5 minutes for 20 minutes. Got away from the traffic, found taxi, got to dock at 640. Dock in Casablanca was in the freight area. Dock manager drove us to the ship, found out there were 3 excursion buses still stuck in traffic coming from Marrakesh, so they were waiting. Cost, we parked in an area where you only can park until 10 p.m. Couldn't read the signs, car got towed. Rental company found it a week later impounded. Total cost was around $450, ticket and loss of use, awesome, wouldn't exactly recommend but exciting day, also talked my way out of a speeding ticket. Story 20, we saw someone miss the ship in Alaska. Our next stop was Canada. The lady stomped her feet and screamed. The man just dropped all the bags she had bought and stared at her in disbelief. It was hysterical and sad all at the same time. Story 21, late 90s. I was on a cruise in the Caribbean with my extended family. We were at a beach on Antigua, and while it was bright and sunny, the waves were picking up and growing fast. My aunts and uncles were body surfing in these strong waves, one of which nearly drowned 9-year-old me, and all of them were injured by underwater rocks. Off they went to the hospital on the island. From what I heard, it was pretty crazy in there. They were frantic trying to make it back to the ship on time, even calling to see if they would wait just a little while longer. The ship said no, so I believe they had to catch a flight to the next stop and wait for the ship to arrive. We are all from coastal towns on a large body of water, but still did not notice that storm rolling in without the clouds. I had never experienced being tossed around like in a washing machine like that before. Ah well, we all know now. Story 22. I was leaving either Greece or Turkey, can't remember, when the captain came on and said we are turning around to meet a boat bringing some passengers that missed the departure. Looked out my balcony, and sure enough a small boat is speeding towards the ship. Story 23. Got left behind in Jamaica. When we got off the ship that morning, we decided to a non-cruise tour to the waterfalls. Got in a van with several people, including a young Venezuelan couple. We were all from the cruise ship, and they assured us we'd be back in time. Had a great day at the waterfalls and stopped for chicken and beers on the way back. Started getting a strange feeling that we were getting close on time. It was maybe in 1:1, 5h out. We explained this to the driver, and he assured us we're fine because it would only take 45 minutes to get back. We explained our concerns again, and turns out the group was not all from the same cruise ship. That's when he also grew very concerned. He hurried us back to the van and off we went. He even asked us all to pay in the van so ITLL would be faster when we get there. The Venezuelan couple didn't have money to cover their portion, and everyone else didn't have enough to cover theirs, so we're just outside the port gates, boat in sight, and all of these other tour guides have surrounded our whole party in kind of a threatening manner to get us to pay. Asks where an ATM is and runs off kind of far to get more cash. I was collateral. We finally pay the guys off and run to the boat. We got to the boat within minutes of it bringing in the ramp. People were cheering us on our run, and we could see the captains looking at us from the top. Boat was, let's say, jumpable if you were an idiot. They quite literally chucked our passports at us and off they went. Cruise services at port helped us get a stay for a couple of nights at all-inclusive resort. Shopped the gift shop for clothes for our stay. We honestly had a killer time, especially considering the last day of the cruise was an at-sea day. Landed in JFK in January in a maxi dress that resembled a Jamaican bobsled and sandals. Luggage got shipped to us a week later. Here's a weird one. When I lived in Hawaii, I got a phone call from my daughter telling me that one of her buddies who took a job on a cruise ship had just been stranded on Maui. She had misplaced her security badges, so they had just kicked her off at the next port. Poor thing, she was just sitting there on the dock with her suitcase when I found her. She was so delighted to find someone coming to her rescue. She had no idea what to do. They found her badges shortly thereafter, but she had to wait until the ship was scheduled to come back to Maui 2 weeks later. Such a harsh way to treat an employee. Story 24. Our extended family took a cruise to Alaska from Seattle. My cousin and her family missed the boat due to major airport problems. Never fly through Dallas. They were able to get on board at the first stop, but also had to disembark one stop early due to whatever maritime laws. She was smart and had travel insurance, so she got some money back. Story 25. I saw someone miss the ship, with no noticeable consequences. It was at a tender's port. That is, the ship was too large to dock, so tenders, basically lifeboats, were used to ferry passengers from the ship to the dock and back. The ship had just started moving out. One of the tenders was still available, so they sent it back out to pick up the lone passenger who was almost left behind. Rumor had it that she was traveling with a child and no other adults, and had left the kid at the kids club while she went ashore. So the captain decided they'd rather make an exception than be stuck with an unaccompanied child. I have no idea if that was true. If it was, I bet that cruise line is a lot stricter about allowing unaccompanied minors to stay on board. Story 26. My sister and her husband booked a cruise, flew from the west coast to Florida for some international cruise. When they went aboard the ship they were asked for their passports, and both of them had assumed that the other had packed them. Turned out neither of them packed the passports, so they were turned away. They watched the ship sail off, had to book flights back home, and didn't talk to each other for a couple of days after. Story 27. One of the best missing the ship stories is from a Joko cruise when a guy fell down a volcano. Fortunately it was on the outside. Story 28. I was in Grand Bahamas once on a cruise with my family. We hired a local driver to take us around to see the sights. He swore up and down and 3 times over that he would guarantee us back in time to catch our ship. It was me, my wife, 2 small children, and my mom. Well, needless to say, we got stuck in awful traffic on the way back through town, and it was getting dicey. You could see the driver getting nervous and my mom, riding shotgun, made a half-serious half-joking comment that if we miss our ship, I hope he has enough room for all of us tonight. And what's for dinner? Dude's face went super serious, and man, that guy took us on a slalom ride through traffic. You could see him plotting out moves 3-4 cars ahead, totally locked in, living out his NASCAR dreams with me and my kids in the back seat. Fast forward into his word. He got us there. We were probably one of the last aboard. Took a few years off my life. Since then I don't go far from port unless it's an official excursion where the ship will wait if you're late. Story 29. Not exactly what you are asking. Left behind, but I was stranded on an island following a boat trip. There were 8 of us stranded on a distant isle after a storm, and because I was mate on the ship, my portly, well-intentioned but grumpy skipper often exploded into sudden but brief rages at my well-intentioned but ill-thought-out antics. Usually his outbursts and berating were followed by him removing his cap, and beating me over the head. My existence was only made bearable by my secret love trysts with a girl next door fellow marooned passenger, and hope that an also stranded professor could invent a device to facilitate our rescue. Story 30. So, not me, but this happened last summer. We were flying from Vegas to FLL, with a layover in Chicago Midway. We were going home. Once in Midway, we saw our flight was delayed due to weather. It eventually got cancelled altogether, and we were rebooked on a 5:45 a.m. flight into Tampa and then a connection to FLL. Anyway, there was a family on our flight who got rebooked on the same flight. They were heading to Miami for a cruise. Had our original flight been able to fly, they would have been fine. But with the rebooking, we didn't get to FLL until 2 p.m. the next day. Their cruise was leaving the port of Miami at 4. I think it was a Sunday, so it was possible they could have made it their bags got lost along the way, probably on the next inbound flight, so they had no clothes, nothing except what they took with them on the plane. I don't know what they wound up doing, but lesson learned, if you're flying to your port city, always leave at least a day early, maybe even 2 days. Story 31 had an interesting one on Viking River Cruise. One of the side trip buses got delayed and the boat was required to leave their mooring. Bus ended up taking us to a shipyard about 10 miles downriver. We walked through the industrial area to a pier and the boat showed up after a bit and we were able to get on. Story 32 missed our ship out of Juneau due to an ER visit for a sprained ankle. Took a puddle jumper to meet the ship the next morning. The ship did call to ask about our passports, but the next point was Skagway, so we didn't need them. Story 33 My colleague once took a 4-week vacation for a cruise. When he returned, I asked how was the cruise. His response was that there was horrible traffic the morning they were supposed to leave and they missed the boat. Ended up with a 4-week staycation. Brutal. Story 34 Cruise originally was set to leave in one port and 2 weeks before it set sail they changed to a port 2 hours away. Me, my ex-husband and more than a few people didn't get on and missed a city. We made friends and flew to the next location where we ran into more people that had a similar thing happen, so quite a few of us checked in at the second dock destination. All was well afterwards and we had a wild story to share. It was crazy discussing with other passengers who did figure it out last minute and almost missed the boat. Felt glad we weren't the only ones it happened to. Story 35 It's always good fun when you see someone running to the leaving cruise ship thinking they were left behind only to turn around and see their actual boat. Saw that one in person. The display of emotions from the guy was strong even from 10 decks up. The sprint. The arms dropped in resignation watching what he thought was his boat leave. The realization his boat is the other in port. And the relief washing over them. Huge emotion roller coaster all wrapped in a minute or two time frame. Story 36 Not me but 2 members of the house band while I was working on board. The biggest issue was that one of them was Ukrainian. So passports and visas became an issue. The company floated them some cash for a room for a few days and flights to meet up later, as we were on a reposition and weren't coming back. Made even more fun by the fact that they had no clothes but the beach where they had on. They looked like drowned rats when they got back. Best believe the rest of the band was at the gangway to meet them. Story 37 I've never missed the ship, we always leave plenty of time to get back. But on our last cruise my sister-in-law got sick on embarkation day and was unable to board. She ended up spending a couple of extra days in the hotel in Fort Lauderdale before she was well enough to fly home, and had to eat the cost of the cruise she missed. I'm pretty sure we're getting the travel insurance every time now. Story 38 On all the cruises I've been on, I've never known or seen someone that's happened to. However, I have seen passengers put off for infractions on board and left with their luggage to their own devices, including the ship's drunk who finally got tossed for hitting up on a nun. Story 39 was a very small cruise ship, just a few hours trip along a coast in Turkey. We arrived with a taxi that was sent by the travel agency. The boat had already left the dock but returned specially for us. Story 40 Missed embarkation because Delta had the engine open on the tarmac for 5 hours, until they finally ripped the part off another plane. 5-hour delay, had to fly to the first port, missed 2 days, then have to get OFF early at the second to last port and find my way back to the airport. 5-hour drive, some law about international ships. Never flying to a cruise again. Flying in early wasn't an option, I had to see patients. Story 41 Not quite what you're asking, but I met someone whose mother missed their cruise. The grandmother didn't mail the ticket in time. It came 3 days late in the mail. The cruise was called the Titanic. I stood there looking at a person that most likely wouldn't have existed if their grandmother had gone to the post office on time. Story 42 I wish. I thought about just packing and never returned to the ship, but instead I stayed like an idiot. Cruises are worst way to travel, never again. Story 43 Thing hit an iceberg and sank. Jest, you couldn't make me go on a cruise if you paid for the ticket and bought everything I needed. No way. Now a great sailing trip would be something else. 2 weeks out on the water with maybe another couple would be my cup of tea. Story 44 On the island of Corfu on one day we supposed to take a boat with transparent bottom as a tour. I don't know how, but I think we went to the wrong meeting location where was no one else except us. We ended up missing the event for that day, so we explored Corfu City on our own instead. This was back in 2008. Story 45 I argued at length that we didn't have to return to the boat and could just live in Belize. I did zero research, but they just invited me to go on a vacation with them again. What's the word on not having the funds for the return flight? Story 46 On the plus side, you gave everyone on board a massive hoot when they watched you sprinting down the pier expecting the boat to stop and let you on. Story 47 I'm sorry, but the thought of you hearing the ship horn while in line for your conch fritters made me just burst out laughing. That sounds like a movie scene. Story 48 Last time I was in Bahamas, I was not part of a cruise. We had a Pig Island excursion where every other guest was a cruise visitor. Excursion ended up starting 5 hours later than expected due to maintenance issues on the boat. Of course that meant the cruise guests had to forego because they needed to get back on the boat. So we essentially got a private tour to the Pig Island. Was very nice. Story 49 Mallory Square will get you. American Samoa. A former Key West resident, me and my buddies called them Rainbow Kids. We assumed they saw a lifestyle they agreed with and missed the boat on purpose. Story 50 Never fly in the same day of departure. We always go to the departure city 1 to 3 days early, and just make that part of the trip. No anxiety over a missed connection, flat tire, delayed flight etc. And it always takes a couple days to decompress down to vacation mode. So when you get on board after a couple days enjoying Miami or wherever, you are already at the right pace. Story 51 That was cool of the airline, but curious, you did miss out on a day of something you paid for because of the cancellation. Did the airline also offer any sort of compensation for that, be it miles, vouchers, money etc.? Story 52 That's awesome that the airline got you to the Bahamas to catch your ship. Did they charge you for this or just rebooked as an apology for the original delay issue? Which airline? Story 53 I have to imagine if you get a big enough group they'll wait for you too, or is that only for the official tours that you book from the cruise line itself? I distinctly remember once our ship was over an hour late to pushing off because one of the tour groups got caught up in traffic and was running late. It was a short ride to the next port anyway, and my understanding is that the ship would just sail around in circles until it's time to dock the next day. Story 54 I was left by a train once. Bangkok traffic hired a motorcycle driver, climbed on the back and we zoomed to the next station. Unfortunately, traffic was so horrible even motorcycles couldn't catch up. We were weaving in between cars and I was seriously worried I was going to lose a limb. I was tucking my legs in as much as I can, wondering if it was worth catching the train. Anyway, long story short, we just missed the train at the next station, gave up catching it, and just hired a van to take us to our destination. Fun but stressful times. Story 55 I'd much rather you played me a clip of a Mission Impossible transfer from a speeding RHIB back onto the moving ship. But fine, promise of a plane ticket it is. Story 56 I got stuck in some crazy standstill traffic in Belize and was very late to get back to a Virgin Voyages ship. Since it was one of their excursions, they held it as you mentioned, but our little group was panicking. Story 57 Incorrect. If the port says leave now, the ship leaves regardless of any ship-sponsored tours still out. However, in this scenario, they will cover the expense of getting you to the next port. It happens rarely, but it does happen. Tides and other conditions make not leaving on schedule a very expensive port call for the ship. Story 58 Some of this seems like bad luck, but not going to check the ship was still there seems like a really bad call. There are loads of reasons a ship might be held up. Story 59 Early morning math skills is wondering if was still cheaper than paying 5x the cruise ship tour price. Like, I know you had to outlay $1,500 for missing the ship, but how much did you save doing the tour on your own? Story 60 This sounds like something straight out of a movie. Did you guys manage to stay calm in that situation? I would have been freaking out to the point of paralysis. Story 61 Getting from Weta to the cruise port can be unpredictable, and there are only 2 routes. One of them goes around the cricket ground, which is best avoided at busy times, but if the cricket's on there's no hope. Story 62 Do you earn a living by giving tours to tourists from cruise ships, which just so happen to take a little longer than advertised? The circle of life. Story 63 Rum Swizzle. Dark and stormy catching the bus mopeds Devil's Hole perfume shop Ye Old Feather pub restaurant Rod Mackenzie Marion to Bermuda Newport to Bermuda Salt Kettle in Dockyard Piggly Wiggly Warwick Parish Harbor Road Crystal Caves Horseshoe Bay Gibbs Hill Lighthouse. This makes sense if your cruise was going international cause the origin port terminal is where they check and verify your ID and passports. Mid-cruise if you've already done all the admin stuff, I imagine they'd have let you jump back on. Story 64 Call them if you're running late as sometimes the ship will wait for you. While I'm a big believer in the answer is always no if you don't ask the number of times they can and will wait is a lot lower than when they want. At the end of the day, everything on a cruise ship is about money and waiting often costs them, either in a fee from the port or in fuel to go faster to get to the next port on time. When they wait hours for a busload of excursion passengers, that's because it's cheaper than paying for them to all get to the next port by alternative means. But in the case where it's an individual that they have no obligation to pay to get to the next port, any additional cost will likely cause them to decide to leave on time. Story 65 My husband and I went on a Viking River cruise a few years ago, and our departure was delayed over an hour because they were waiting for 2 passengers who were late. I don't know the backstory, but in the end the delay didn't really make a difference. Story 66 This is possibly the only positive missing your cruise story I've heard so far. Glad you made the best of it and you still had a great experience. Story 67 Hey, that's Gavin Verhey. He's the principal designer for Magic the Gathering. If you play MTG and never get a chance to meet him, he is the nicest person ever, you Gavin V. Story 68 Which travel insurance company did they use? It's awful that their vacation was ruined by your dad's accident, but the fact that their claim was paid was a silver lining. Story 69 Oh man I was in Athens and actually got back kind of late. There was one of those hop-on-off buses that went to the cruise terminal. We hopped on it and the bus driver was just outside smoking a cig. 10 after we were scheduled to go I finally went down and asked if the bus was running. He took his sweet time but he did eventually go. We were late, only people going through the security check. Go up to the balcony have a stress relief drink and we see the taxi absolutely flying towards the boat. skipping security and everything. They sprint from the taxi and do make it on, but they were lucky the boat was late refueling. Story 70. I nearly did it on purpose. I think a lot of first-time cruise passengers realize that cruise is partway through, so they would rather just depart and meet the cruise later. I regret not doing it, knowing what I know now. Story 71. I wonder how much of this is on purpose though. I really wanted to just leave my bags in the room so I wouldn't have to carry them, pack a backpack, depart, and meet the cruise at the final destination port. I think there's a fairly large portion of the population that are like me and absolutely hate cruises. You have a cruise of 3K people. Gotta be a non-insignificant number of first-time cruise passengers who realize their mistake after the second night and are just saying it. Story 72. They still let you drop your kids off at the club on port days. The only rule change is that the older kids can't check themselves out versus a sea day where they can. I personally take my child when we do ports because it's a family vacation and we want to explore together. Story 73. Similar was me. Took my boat with boys from Lauderdale to Bimini for a fishing weekend rented house, and when we pulled into port with customs to check in and 36 people didn't bring passports. 2 of those even forgot their luggage. It was a wild night before heading out in the AM. I looked at the Bahamas customs boat's power, looked at mine and said we got this if needed. Was a great weekend.